Welcome to American Education FM, everybody. I'm Dr. Sean Brooks. Welcome back, everybody. Okay, this is going to be the last episode of the week. Got some family coming in town for Easter weekend. Again, hope everybody has a great Easter weekend as well. But this one might be a little longer than usual, so yeah, let's get into it. First of all, on Wednesday morning, there's going to be another Substack article, theamericanclassroom.substack.com, titled Mesh Networking. A very brief description of the mesh network, what it is, how it's intertwined, and some of the sort of under-the-table, behind-the-scenes deals that are being made, unfortunately, regarding a lot of these insurance companies. And again, their protocols, basically, and how they're connected to the mesh network, and then, of course, how that is going to directly impact patients. And like I've said before on the show, it's certainly something that has already happened and something that we've already seen where hospitals, doctors, etc. have a protocol and a policy, and if you don't adhere to it, well, they'll either kidnap you and kill you and do it anyway, or they'll kick you out and then basically say, good luck, you're on your own, don't come back. The other twist in all of this has to do again with health insurance companies and how basically there's, I would say, a foundation at the very least that's been laid here where insurance companies are going to be told that if you don't accept the hospital's protocols or your doctor's protocols for whatever it is that ails you, then they have the right to kick you off of their policy. So again, it's a comply with us or else strategy, essentially. So yeah, I laid that out very briefly. And again, it's one of those, I think, brief Substack articles that would be easy for just about anybody to read and certainly share with individuals who don't even know that this is, a thing and that this exists. Again, as I say at the very end of the article, it's very difficult to destroy an enemy or fight an enemy when you don't even understand who they are or where they are or what they're doing. So, yeah, again, you bring this up to your average human being, they would have no idea what all of this is, even though the walls of this mesh network are being built around us all the time. Again, I reference automobiles as a prime example. You see the way that automobiles are being built, they're basically, again, mobile electrical grids. They're just filled with so much electronics now and Wi-Fi hotspots and the whole thing. It's a radioactive device on four wheels. And that's not good. And of course, those automobiles are all communicating with one another. And if a person believes that is not available for hacking, that if you're driving down the road next to another automobile that's also a Wi-Fi hotspot, that both of those automobiles can be hacked. And then before you know it, your engine and transmission are making weird noises driving down the road, and you don't know why. That's essentially, again, the mesh network. That these automobiles also can be hacked, but so can human beings. So I get into it again more specifically within the actual article, but I show you the white papers and the diagrams that have already been built. Again, this is a real thing. It's in endless research papers, and yes, our government is funding this with our tax dollars. So there you go. Okay. Moving on to this. And I couldn't help but laugh as soon as I saw this, and I thought, well, there it is. Of course it's happening. Two stories right on the top of the Gateway Pundit, both having to do with Charlie Kirk. Isn't this weird? Now all of a sudden the story's not fitting as far as everybody is concerned and all the individuals involved with this so-called trial. It says, bombshell defense filing, ATF cannot identify bullet in Charlie Kirk assassination with accused's rifle. Interesting. Now, why would that be? Because they didn't find a bullet, because there wasn't one. He wasn't shot. At the very least, I would say a blank was used. This person was clearly set up, if it even happened on the same day. If the person was even on the rooftop at the exact same day. And yeah, very difficult to match a bullet with a gun when you don't have the bullet. Because there wasn't one. Because he's not dead. Again, this whole thing is falling apart. It says a court filing by Tyler Robinson's defense on Friday revealed that the ATF has not been able to identify the bullet recovered in the autopsy of slain Turning Point USA leader Charlie Kirk with the rifle allegedly used in the September 10 shooting at Utah Valley University, according to the Daily Mail. And now it says again, Kirk was reportedly killed instantly by a single rifle shot that tore through his upper body and ripped open the carotid artery in his neck. No, none of that happened, and if it did happen, why would you say reportedly? I thought you were certain that that's what had happened. But yeah, didn't find a bullet in the autopsy because there wasn't an autopsy, because there's no bullet, because he's not dead, because it was fake. It can't get more obvious. It says, while not definitive, the bullet could be misshapen from the shooting, until it is resolved. The claim by the defense will fuel concerns about the circumstances of Kirk's murder and whether Robinson was the shooter. Well, yeah, because he wasn't. He probably wanted to be, but he wasn't. He was set up. And then again, it was fake. It says the bullet that killed conservative commentator Charlie Kirk did not match the rifle used by suspected killer Tyler Robinson, a bombshell new court filing states. Yeah. And this isn't something that's going to be done quickly either. Again, they're in the preliminary stages of this trial. So again, both sides are gathering evidence and they're doing all kinds of things. And they're saying, again, they're at least 6 months out. Even when it comes to examining the so-called ballistics, of which there aren't any, that will take them, at least the ATF and the feds, it'll take them 6 months to figure this out. The fact is it'll take 6 months for them to fake some kind of a story and fabricate some new narrative on all of this because, again, you have nothing. You just have a person who says that they confessed because they were there, allegedly, and then they say that they did it, when clearly they didn't, because clearly he's not dead, which again means that he was set up. So did he want to kill him? Probably. But they just let it go, and then they used him being there and probably gave him blanks and put the gun up there themselves and the whole thing. Again, it's beyond bizarre. You would think that would be the question that they would ask. How did you get up there? How did you get up to the roof with a gun? But yeah, you're not going to find a bullet because there wasn't one. And then you have this, and this is equally as laughable. Also, Gateway Pundit, again, they're showing everybody this to their faces, and people still can't figure this out. Sheriff who handled surrender of Charlie Kirk assassination suspect abruptly resigns after 30 years. Longtime Washington County Sheriff Nate Brooksby has officially stepped down after more than 3 decades in law enforcement, just months after playing a central role in the high-profile surrender of the man accused of assassinating conservative hero Charlie Kirk. Now, this is where you know that this guy knows what's going on. And here's exactly how you know it. It says the following. According to K12, Brooksby quietly submitted his resignation last Friday, with county officials confirming his departure and thanking him for his service. Quote, "We express our sincere appreciation for his dedication and service to Washington County," the county said in a statement. According to ABC4, Brooksby met with the county commissioners on Friday to discuss vague complaints about officer operations. Hours later, he resigned on the spot. So he had complaints about what he was witnessing among other officers, apparently. And then that's it, he resigns. Because at some point, he's probably sharing some information that doesn't match what other people believe, and then all of a sudden, he's told, well, you've got your 30 years in, you're good, have a nice day, tender your resignation. And then he does, probably signs a non-disclosure agreement, and out the door. Not to mention, and this is kind of the most important part, his resignation happened the same day that Tyler Robinson's lawyers filed the paperwork having to do with the ATF and the bullet, so to speak, not matching the gun. All of this happened on the exact same day. That's not a coincidence, because coincidences don't exist. Again, it just couldn't be more obvious that the whole thing was staged and the whole thing was fake. In fact, just the other day, I found myself thinking about this particular case, and it's a thought that hits my mind from time to time, not with this case, but situations like it, I suppose. And I basically just say, is it possible that when it comes to all of these events, again, whether they be fake, real, staged, whatever, is it possible that everybody is in on it? Does it have to be every single person who knows exactly what's going on and every single person is in on it? Or are there some good people who openly say, this doesn't smell right, this doesn't look right, all my years of experience and this seems really hinky to me, so I'm going to tell the truth, or I'm going to quit in protest, or I'm going to do this or I'm going to do that? Again, is it possible that everybody's in on it? That every single person is in on the lie, that everybody knows that it was fake and they're all just going along to get along because, again, they're all Freemasons and they all stick together no matter what. And if you deviate, then, you're cast out in the whole thing. I mean, clearly the answer is no. Not everybody's in on it. Not everybody's willing to lie about it. And you can't have, again, that many police officers around this entire situation. Certainly local police. It's not like the local police would all be involved. It would take a few of them to be involved. Certainly the feds would be involved. And certainly, again, his private security in the whole thing. But of course, if you're not involved and you're not given a heads up as to why this fake event is going to take place, then you should have legit questions. Because look at the people who are clearly in on it. I mean, it's everybody. It's the entire federal government by and large. It's certainly the entire Trump administration. The question then becomes why? Why is it that they ran point on this entire fake event? To, of course, most obviously, I think, not ask the questions that need to be asked, which haven't been asked. So then somebody starts to ask a few questions or make a few complaints like this sheriff, and they're shown the door. That right there should prove to you, again, that when everybody's thinking alike, someone's not thinking, or when everybody's in on something, there's a reason why they're all in on it. There's a reason why they're all sticking together. Again, I think there's lots of different angles to the entire Charlie Kirk thing, and I think one of them, believe it or not, was to bring down TPUSA. And I think that that's actually happening. I think it's working. TPUSA was theoretically a spy agency among other agencies. It's certainly a cult, and it's certainly a brainwashing operation. Again, I was sent some audio the other day and video that was taken sort of privately of Erica Kirk, I believe on the campus of Arizona State University. And she was basically talking with her TPUSA chapter and basically saying, don't ask questions about the assassination. Don't do that. Just have conversations about free speech. Just keep pushing free speech. And I mean, the irony in that statement is absolutely hilarious. Because again, she's saying don't look into it because they don't want you to think a particular way. And they certainly don't want you to think on your own as an individual, which is why they have these groups to begin with. That's the entire point. Again, college campuses, as we know, are recruiting grounds for this kind of cult-like behavior and these kinds of people and these kinds of organizations, which clearly work with either foreign governments, our own government, or both to some extent. It's just become painfully obvious, I think, that the people running TPUSA are trying to keep the grift alive. And they need participation, and they need funding, and they need money, and they need college students because, again, most parents are going to be like, oh, Charlie Kirk was a good person, and TPUSA is the greatest thing since sliced bread, and we have money to send you to college, which means we also have money to donate to TPUSA, so we'll do that through you. Because if our son or daughter is affiliated with that, then that's a good cause. Unbeknownst to all of them, of course, they're all being taken for a ride. I mean, one of their members, again, was on another college campus. I played the audio in the last war video. But he's walking around the room wearing a Freedom t-shirt, and he's saying things like, we didn't have any clothes. We sold our clothes. Erica Kirk sold all her clothes after Charlie died because she couldn't look at any of it, and it was just terrible. So we had to buy clothes and buy new clothes, and that's why we spent money on clothes and blah, blah, blah. I mean, he sounds like a cult member. He's not making any sense. And the sad part was that nobody in that room stood up and said, Charlie's not dead, the whole thing was fake, you're a grifter. Get the hell out of here. Not one person. They all sat there and they just listened to it. And they were like, don't listen to the conspiracy theorists. They're all on the internet. They don't know what they're talking about. It's called thinking. It's called common sense. And yeah, when a group of people get together to break the law, that's called a conspiracy. And there certainly is one regarding this. Again, TPUSA is useless, just like CPAC. And those two organizations were tied at the hip. Now look what's happened to both of them. They're both crumbling. They're both irrelevant. So there's no doubt there's an exposure op going on, and lots of them going on, I should say, and it's never ending. But I'll say this too, leaning into First Amendment stuff, it certainly seems like there's a lot of First Amendment arguments and First Amendment debates taking place right now. I meant to mention this earlier, certainly in the last episode, having to do with Canada, just very quickly. This was from LifeSite News, titled, Canada's House of Commons passes anti-Christian bill that would criminalize quoting Bible. It says Canada's MPs passed Radical Bill C9 in a 186 to 137 vote, and Conservatives are now calling on Christians to pray and flood senators with phone calls and emails opposing the bill. Yeah. Again, they clearly don't have free speech laws like we do. They're infringing on all of them all of the time. The simple fact that this would pass is an abomination, and certainly in our country would be immediately overturned in the blink of an eye. But unfortunately, again, that's the sad state of affairs regarding Canada. And yeah, it just seems to never end. Then there was this one. Again, here in the United States, you would think that this would be a massive lawsuit, and hopefully this individual files one. Jaden Ivey of the Chicago Bulls was waived on March 30th of this year for quote-unquote conduct detrimental to the team, shortly after an Instagram live rant that included anti-LGBTQ comments. Now, I saw the video, and he's in an automobile. Looks like his phone is in his lap, aimed up at his face. And again, he's saying everything that is 100% legit. And again, he has freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of expression. That cannot be infringed. It can't be infringed because of some contract. Again, the Constitution trumps contracts. Here's a quick little piece of what he said. He said, quote, the world can proclaim LGBTQ, right? They proclaim Pride Month. In the NBA, they proclaim it. They show it to the world. They say, come join us for Pride Month to celebrate unrighteousness. They proclaim it on the billboards. They proclaim it in the streets, unrighteousness. He's right. Again, he should sue. And he shouldn't be careful with his words either. Again, I was just very quickly listening to Jason Whitlock. He was on X, and him and his round table of idiots were sitting around talking about this. And unfortunately, and he didn't take the stance I thought he would. Unfortunately, he basically said that Jaden Ivey needs to pick his battles. And he needs to be careful, and he needs to extinguish his own freedom of speech a little bit, and he needs to be quiet, and he needs to learn again when to talk and when not to, and XYZ. Bullshit. He should double down. That's what should happen in all of these cases all of the time. You double down. He's giving his opinion. Yeah. You don't have to wear rainbow-colored jerseys all of the time. If a player doesn't want to do it, they don't have to. You would think, again, that an organization would do their best to not be divisive, certainly when it comes to the First Amendment. You would think. You would think, again, that they would do whatever they could to avoid lawsuits and even the negative image that comes with any of it. Again, they even brought up in their little discussion, again, I only listened to maybe like 3 minutes of it, but they brought up the Colin Kaepernick stuff all over again. That, where was the outrage and the freedom of speech outrage when Colin Kaepernick was taking a knee on the sidelines during the national anthem and blah, blah, blah. That was different, but again, he was allowed to do it. It was just again, from our stance, certainly on this side of the right thing, it was in poor taste. What he was doing was in poor taste at the height of the Black Lives Matter con job that was taking place and that entire fraud grift scheme, which is what it was, and remarkably violent and illegal and 1,000 other things. That's way different. That's different. Because taking a knee during the Pledge of Allegiance during a football game at that time, or any sporting event at that time, that was in bad taste. Calling LGBTQ whatever, alphabet soup people bullshit, unrighteousness is accurate. Certainly from a biblical standpoint. And this guy loves Jesus. And here we are on Holy Week. They fired him on Holy Week. I mean, what is going on? Yes, I know this is the part where people would say, it's the Jews, Sean. Yes, I'm aware. I know who runs the NBA. It doesn't shock me that they would fire an NBA player for freedom of speech, specifically, again, saying that he views LGBTQ stuff as unrighteous, which it is, and that all of that would happen during Holy Week and that a Jew would be behind that. Of course I know that. It's, again, that too is remarkably obvious and should be. But the NBA player needs to stand firm here. This Jaden Ivey guy. He has to. This is a lawsuit, a big one. This is a massive, massive lawsuit. Again, someone has to take a stand here in the bread and circus arena when it comes to freedom of speech and expression and all of it. Again, I understand the Colin Kaepernick thing. I get it. And the league kicked him out because, again, he was taking a knee and he was divisive on the team and the whole thing. But see, if you're a Chicago Bull, what you do is, as a player, is you all walk away. That's how you send a message. Is everybody walks away. Oh, you got rid of Jaden Ivey for saying it? Well, I'm going to say it too. Now fire me. And then make them. And then do it again. And then do it again. And then do it again. You double down. You triple down. It's the man versus the masses. Who's in charge, really? The individual? The God-created individual, or the satanic corporation made by people on earth? It can't be both. The other thing too with this, and I'm gonna quote him one more time, Jaden Ivey here. And his coach, by the way, Billy Donovan, is a complete idiot because he's just showing everybody again that he's a corporate stooge, and he'll just do whatever the corporation tells him, no matter what. And again, he's weak, and herein lies the problem. But in moments like this in a person's life, this is an individual, again, he is awake, and certainly waking up. And I think that awakening process is continuing to happen, but this is the watershed moment here in Jaden Ivey's life. Jesus or basketball? Which is it going to be? And I think he's picked, and he's chosen correctly. If a person picks round ball over Jesus, they have something wrong with them. Because look at all of the individuals, again, acting like he doesn't even exist. And this is what happens in any working environment. I know this personally. This is what happens in any working environment. When you stand up and you do the right thing, you instantly find out all of the individuals that you work with who won't stand up with you and do the right thing. Everybody gets quiet. Everybody gets nervous, and then everybody acts like you don't exist. Jaden Ivey went on here and he said, quote, "They're liars, bro. This is lying. All I'm preaching about is Jesus Christ, and they waved me. They say I'm crazy, right? I'm psycho. Why didn't they just say we don't agree with his stance on LGBTQ?" Unquote. Because it's slavery. That's why. And it's about sending a message. You have to whip somebody in order to keep everybody on the plantation. That's the point. It's modern day slavery. It says the Bulls coach Billy Donovan later said that the comments didn't reflect the organization's values, noting the team has employees from all different walks of life, quote unquote. So effing what? So what? No one cares. No one cares what your perversions are. And if a person, again, speaks out against those perversions, good. They get to. Just like the person with all the perversions pushes their perversions on everybody else all of the time. This is not a one-way street. But anybody who's trying to make it a one-way street is a godless monster, and they're satanic, period. And I'm going to say this too, if anybody disagrees with that, then stop listening to this show. The fact is that this guy, this basketball player, is waking up to the real world. He's getting the cord ripped out of the back of his head. And he's realizing that there's only one choice in this life to make, and that's either Jesus or your job. Which one matters more? Jobs suck. Jesus is great. It's pretty obvious, isn't it? Should be. Not as far as the NBA is concerned. They're godless. Billy Donovan, godless. Chicago Bulls, godless. You can go right down the list. And the way that they've treated him should show all the other slaves that this is exactly how you're being treated. That if you have an opinion, you need to keep it quiet because this is a corporation. And we have rules around here, and, well, our corporate laws, which don't exist, supersede your individual rights. I don't think so. Nope. He should double down and then sue the shit out of him. And he'll win. And then every organization is going to have to buckle. Every single one of them. So bravo as far as I'm concerned. Bravo. He wins the award for the week, I think. Now there's also this, speaking of gays, believe it or not, in Colorado, there are some whack jobs over there who wanted to outlaw talk therapy for gays, trannies, and the whole LGBT alphabet soup gang. All of them. They wanted to outlaw talk therapy, that a counselor or a therapist isn't allowed to talk to these individuals about why they are the way that they are, but instead tell them, as counselors and therapists and what have you, that they need to cut their genitals off or chemically castrate themselves. That's what the therapy should be for anybody who, again, associates with those perversions. So now, of course, the Supreme Court took this up apparently on Monday, and they ruled that as I'm recording this today on Tuesday, the case specifically was Chilas, if I'm saying that right, versus Salazar. And specifically, it had to do with Colorado's ban on so-called conversion therapy for minors, at least as it says, applied to certain talk therapy. The decision was 8-1. Justice Gorsuch wrote the majority opinion, joined by everybody else, except for, you guessed it, Ketanji Brown Jackson was the sole dissenter. She's the one who didn't want therapists to talk with gays or trannies or whomever about their past and whether or not mutilating themselves would be a good idea. And maybe if we just get down to the bottom psychological reason as to why somebody dresses up like a cat and shits in a litter box, that would be better than cutting their genitals off. I'm telling you, Jackson has got to go. And I think once the 2020 election is rectified here, she's out the door. Now, a little background on this particular case. It says in 2019, Colorado enacted the Mental Health and Children's Therapy Protection Act, which usually means that's not going to be the case, sometimes called the Minor Conversion Therapy Law. It prohibited licensed mental health professionals, counselors, therapists, etc., from engaging in conversion therapy with anyone under 18. The law defines conversion therapy as any practice or treatment that attempts to change an individual's sexual orientation or gender identity. This includes efforts to change behaviors, gender expressions, or to eliminate or reduce sexual or romantic attractions toward people of the same sex. Again, it was really directed towards gays and basically saying, okay, why are you gay? And then getting down to the bottom reason of that. Why is it that this is your chosen perversion? Who touched you when you were a kid? I mean, that's talk therapy, but that's not what Colorado wanted. They wanted to outlaw this form of talk therapy and just quickly move right into pulling out the scalpel and cutting parts off and the whole thing. There's apparently a couple of specifics within this too. It explicitly outlaws acceptance, support, and understanding for identity, exploration, and development. That seems odd. Also permits assisting minors undergoing gender transition. Violators face fines up to $5,000 and possible loss of their professional license. The law does not apply to unlicensed religious counselors or non-professionals. It says this type of law exists in roughly 20 to 25 other states. Major medical organizations like the American Medical Association, American Psychological Association, the American Academy of Pediatrics, etc., consider conversion therapy ineffective and potentially harmful to minors, citing risks of depression, anxiety, and suicidality. Well, yeah, clearly. Who challenged it and why? Background on the specific SCOTUS case here. Kaylee Chillis, if I'm saying that right, Chilis, is a licensed professional counselor in Colorado with a master's in clinical mental health. She describes herself as providing only talk therapy, conversations, no drugs, no procedures. She does not start with a predetermined goal. Instead, she discusses the client's own objectives and helps them pursue those goals while respecting self-determination. Some of her minor clients want help aligning with their biological sex, reducing unwanted same-sex attractions, or changing certain behaviors expressions. Chilis says that she would engage in that discussion if it's the client's goal. She argues that Colorado law prevents her from doing so based on her client's wishes and sometimes her own religious beliefs. Chilis sued, claiming that the law violates the First Amendment because it is viewpoint discrimination. Yes, it is. Just like the basketball player. The state allows therapists to affirm or support LGBTQ+ identity, exploration, and gender transition, but forbids any talk therapy that tries to do the opposite. Lower courts, District Court and 10th Circuit rejected her challenge, and they ruled the law regulates professional conduct, like a medical standard of care, not pure speech, so it only gets minimal, rational basis review. And what did the Supreme Court actually hold in this case? As applied to this particular talk therapy, Colorado's law regulates speech based on viewpoint and content, singles out and forbids certain messages, attempts to change orientation, gender identity, etc., while expressly permitting the opposite viewpoint, acceptance and support for identity exploration or transition. It says talk therapy is pure speech. The spoken word is perhaps the quintessential form of protected speech. Labeling it treatment or therapy does not magically turn it into a regulable conduct. And it says the First Amendment still applies fully. Of course. Of course it does. It goes on, it says the First Amendment generally forbids viewpoint discrimination, an especially bad form of content-based regulation. Such laws are presumptively unconstitutional and must survive strict scrutiny or at least sufficiently rigorous First Amendment review. The government must prove the restriction is narrowly tailored to a compelling interest. Lower courts wrongfully treated this as mere regulation of professional conduct with only incidental speech effects. They cited other past cases. There's no historical tradition that would allow a state to dictate therapists' viewpoints in this way. Licensing laws traditionally address qualifications, not what viewpoints a licensed professional may express during counseling. No kidding. Jackson, again the only dissenting party, argued alone that the law regulates professional medical conduct, not speech for its own sake. Speech that occurs inside the therapist-client relationship as part of providing care is professional medical speech. She's an idiot. God, I can't stand her. And can be regulated, she says, under the state's traditional authority over the practice of medicine and licensing. Well, if that's true, then that means that a doctor and a patient can't have a conversation about anything. They can't have a conversation about any other form of treatment. You can't talk to a nurse. You and a nurse can't have a back and forth about other forms of treatment. You can't bring up a news article that you saw, or a social media post, or a book, or a document that might have a better alternative. See the slippery slope? And Jackson was the only one who took that slippery slope. She's a communist. She said that the majority's approach could make it impossible for states to set any standards of care for talk therapy, potentially harming minors. Oh my God. She is an abomination. Okay. What it means going forward, it says for Colorado specifically, the state must go back to the lower courts and try to show its law survives rigorous First Amendment scrutiny. When applied to this case, most observers expect it will fail. Again, it says similar laws in 20 plus other states are now highly vulnerable to identical challenges. It says this is about talk therapy only, this particular SCOTUS case. It does not affect states' ability to ban puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones, or surgeries for minors. Well, that needs to be outlawed in the United States too. It says the decision turns on free speech principles, not on whether conversion therapy works or is harmful. The court did not weigh in on the medical evidence. In short, the Supreme Court held that the government cannot use licensing power to forbid licensed counselors from expressing certain viewpoints about sexuality and gender during private talk therapy sessions with minors, even if the state believes these viewpoints are misguided or harmful. The ruling prioritizes the First Amendment's protection against viewpoint discrimination over the state's interest in regulating what it sees as substandard therapeutic practices, unquote. Again, the NBA player, ladies and gentlemen, if he takes a stand on this, legally speaking, then the LGBTQ house of cards is going to crumble from a corporate standpoint. These two situations are very similar in endless ways, I think. And again, if you just look at the entire sports arena and the whole LGBT stuff, wear a rainbow armband, or let's wear a rainbow patch on your jersey, or hell, let's make your whole jersey a giant tranny rainbow. They only do it for those perversions. And that's what it is. It's a perversion. What they don't do is they don't do it for endless other things. Now, unfortunately, if memory serves, last year, I think it was at the very least last year, the Boston Red Sox were wearing Ukraine jerseys. They were dressed in the flag of Ukraine. See, that's why I don't watch sports, among other reasons, but that's the main reason. That kind of stuff, when it's pushed on those individuals and you see those individuals just take it, those people are cowards. And that's exactly what that is. It's cowardice. They're not educating themselves about what's really going on with a particular event in the real world, and they're allowing their corporate masters, their slave owners, to basically tell them what to wear, when to wear it, and that if you don't, well, something bad is going to happen to you. I've told this story before, certainly a long time ago on the show here, but when I taught, there was a documentary that came out. I think it was called Waiting for Superman. And it was a documentary bashing the public school system across the nation, and rightfully so. And then it was promoting charter schools. And the sad part in the documentary wasn't that it was bashing public schools. All of that was accurate. The sad part is that they were highlighting the lottery system of trying to get into a charter school and how the lottery system ultimately, of course, is a lottery. So it's at random. And these students who, again, were basically, again, slaves to their own zip code and slaves to their local public school with no other choice, that if they won the lottery, of course, they were beyond elated to get out of the public school system and enter a new school. So the simple fact, again, that anybody would be against school choice, for example, just proves that they're a full-blown communist. But during that time, when that documentary came out, randomly, out of nowhere, and it was coordinated, and this, again, was when things really started to ramp up and get political, is in our mailboxes, there was a T-shirt. And it was a blue shirt with the red Superman S on the front. And then below it, it said something like, "Looking for Superman? I'm right here." And then they wanted all the teachers to wear it and then take a group photo, and then that would be in the newspaper. I went to my mailbox, I grabbed the T-shirt, I threw it in the trash, and I said, "Get bent." And I didn't participate in the photo. And most teachers, well, I don't want to say most, a lot of teachers didn't. Some teachers did, and they were like, "Yeah, I'm great at my job." And as it turned out, most of the teachers who participated were dog shit. Because that's the way it goes. Just another NPC falling for the same thing all over again, being manipulated on the plantation without their knowledge or, again, the ability to think as an individual. Free speech is always under attack. It's always under attack. And you don't play nice with it, and you don't pick your battles, and you don't, well, you need to cool out and extinguish that thought, and blah, blah, blah. No, ladies and gentlemen, that's what got us here in the first place. Think of that. The Supreme Court is taking up cases from Americans who are trying to crush the Constitution of the United States. And this happens all the time. What should happen is there needs to be some veiled threat, not even a veiled threat, just make it direct, that if you decide to implement anything that is, again, at face value unconstitutional and you lose in court, then you lose your law license. And you pay fines, the likes of which you can't possibly imagine, that you'll never be able to pay off in a lifetime. There need to be strict penalties for people who attempt to bring cases like this, just like the Chicago Bulls. You fire somebody because they go off on the whole gay agenda and they call it unrighteous and it not being biblical, and you cut that person loose. It should be common sense and it should be common law that if you attempt to do something like that to a free American, then you're the one who's going to pay. The amount of money and the amount of time that gets lost in this constant battle within our own country over something that should be, again, at face value, common sense, morally sound, is just beyond outrageous. But it's satanic. And we are on that battlefield, are we not? Case in point, how about this one? Did you hear about this one from Fox News? I bet you didn't. This is from Haaretz or Haaretz.com. It's real, by the way. You can look this up even using an AI system. Archaeologists find 2,500-year-old mass grave of infants in Israel. Did Fox News report on that? Why not? It says the following here. Archaeologists from Tel Aviv University and collaborators recently announced the discovery of a 2,500-year-old mass grave at the ancient site of Azekah, also known as Tel Azekah, southwest of Jerusalem in Israel. It says the grave was found in a repurposed ancient cistern, a water storage pit, among the ruins. It contained the jumbled remains of dozens of skeletons with up to 89 individuals identified so far. Around 90% of those were under 5 years old and more than 70% were infants less than 2 years old. It also included some older children. Now, what was going on back then regarding children and mass sacrifice? Oh, yeah, the same thing that still happens today, certainly among those kinds of people from time to time. But apparently, Persians were involved as well, as apparently the grave was used during the Persian period, and jewelry was also found with the remains. This places it around 2,500 years ago, after the Babylonian exile, when the religion was part of the Persian province of Yehud, the Persian name for Judah. Now, in all fairness, I wasn't there, so I don't know what happened, and I don't know why all those young children were in a mass grave in that one location. However, we can certainly take a few guesses, I think. Again, mass extermination of infants being one. It's possible that there was a plague of some kind, and that, again, children being buried separate from their parents would have been a rather common practice back then, so they say. But, yeah, mass satanic sacrifice, possibly? I would put my eggs in that basket, frankly. I think that would fit. Speaking of that, let me mention this real quick, given the fact that this is, again, Holy Week, and happy Holy Week, everybody. I saw, again, I brought this up on the show a while back when I first saw this documentary, and it was sent to me by a listener of the show, and thank you for sending it, although the name of the documentary has now slipped my mind. But it had to do with an individual, again, who was going throughout biblical history and trying to figure out whether or not Jesus ate meat. That was kind of that was the general basis of the whole thing. And the conclusions that he reached is that there's no proof that he ate meat. That there was wine consumption and there was bread consumption, possibly fish, fruits, vegetables, things of that nature, but there was no indication that Jesus ever ate meat. And one of the elements of history that gets left out, specifically again regarding Holy Week, is when Jesus entered the temple and flipped the tables, quote unquote, of the money changers and the money lenders. This, of course, and those individuals in the temple, of course, were Jewish. And with that said, or they were imposters. But either way, the element that gets left out, which is brought up in the documentary, which is worth noting, is that it wasn't just money changers and money lenders that were there. It was animal sacrificers. That the place and the walls were covered in blood, and animal blood. And that they were mutilating animals and they were skinning them and, again, ritualistically sacrificing them in these satanic rituals and the whole thing. That's really what the table flipping was about. Yes, money was involved, clearly, but it was the sight of all of the blood and the horror that was taking place within the temple. I just find it interesting that, again, when you leave out such a critical moment and a critical piece of history like that, it changes the story altogether. In fact, one of the things that they brought up in the documentary, which was a very astute point, I thought, is they mentioned that in basically any rendering of Jesus flipping the tables in a painting or otherwise, certainly paintings and tapestries and things of that nature, that you would always see the image of an animal within the temple somewhere, whether it be a cow or birds or a lamb or something in a cage or whatever it is. That those images, albeit very few, but they do exist, and they're certainly not taking up the majority of any painting. But when there's an animal in those paintings, as there is in practically all of them, that's what it's trying to allude to. It's alluding to the fact that there was something else going on within the temple other than just coin clipping and money lending and taxing and things of that nature. Theft, basically. It was way worse. It was way more horrific. Doesn't take much to manipulate history. Again, you just leave out a few details and no one ever hears of it ever again. Pretty ridiculous. Okay, with that said, I want to play this now. This is about 12 minutes long, so bear with it. But this is, again, the Promethean Action Gals. And this is specifically Susan Kokinda. And she's talking about RFK's speech at CPAC and what he said, again, regarding Donald Trump and what's really going on. And again, kind of a bigger picture here. And I think this is worth giving a listen to. Again, these actions overseas have to do with the deep state. And I saw someone online, I think it was greatawakening.win, and they were commenting on why is it that, in fact, it's kind of bouncing around social media, I'll basically say, and it's bouncing around social media among the unknowledgeable as to what's really going on. And the argument that they make is they're openly saying, look at the people on the left, they're not protesting the war. And look at the people on the right, they're not protesting it either, thereby proving that it's just two wings of the same bird, both political parties. Well, we know that. But I actually think, personally, that you're not seeing a lot of war protest right now on either side, because neither side really knows what the hell's going on. And both sides, for one reason or another, have sort of settled on, well, we're just doing it because the Jews told us to. We're just doing it because, again, Israel is our puppet master and Donald Trump is Netanyahu's puppet and the whole thing. And that is not the case. That is not what's going on. So I think that the reason, again, that you're not seeing protests that are sort of anti-war is because those of us who really know what the hell is going on here know how serious this is and how this has to happen. And you have to uproot the deep state in all the locations around the world where they exist. This has to be done. And if it's done now, then the world has a chance, because what the world had planned and what the deep state had planned for everybody, well, think 2020 on steroids. Again, we already got a taste of it. I still laugh when I hear people talk about being locked down, quote unquote. Well, we were locked down for 2 weeks and we didn't leave our house for 2 weeks. Well, you're an idiot. I wasn't locked down. I didn't comply. I went wherever I wanted to, got yelled at in stores, didn't care. But what the enemy had planned for us back then, had Hillary had won, would have been way worse. Now the roots are being pulled out from all over the world. And that's a good thing, and that has to happen. But the President of the United States doesn't have to tell everybody why he's doing it. Not yet, anyway. The time for disclosure and declass on why this is really happening from his standpoint and him telling the people why this is really taking place, he's kind of already said it. He certainly said it in Q posts. Again, you can go back and read all the posts that have the word Iran in it and Ukraine in it. Go for it. You'll get a full picture as to why we're really there and what's really going on. But for your average person, again, who isn't paying attention, they wouldn't know. And the people who are screaming again, well, we're just doing this because Israel told us to, those people are equally as foolish. So here's Susan Kokinda again, breaking down a number of different things regarding, again, RFK, JFK, Trump, a lot of these connections. Give her a listen in 3, 2, 1.
Robert F. Kennedy Jr. made one of the most remarkable statements of the past week at the CPAC conference.
I think Donald Trump understands the use of power better than probably any president that we've had, at least since Roosevelt and maybe in American history. I think my father and my uncle would support. I think that if they were around today, they would be making the same kind of choice that President Trump is about Iran, about Ukraine, about trying to raise up the middle class.
He also pointed out that he was raised in a Democratic Party that was very opposed to NAFTA. But the moment Trump came out against it, the Democrats flipped and supported free trade. Those two statements tell you more about what is really going on in the world than endless hours of media coverage or doom scrolling. The media is lost in the fog of war and politics. Take The Economist. They're telling you that Iran has the advantage and a month of bombing has accomplished nothing. Or the mainstream press, which is telling you that the No King's Day rallies featuring adults who dressed up as frogs and featuring drag queens represent the political mood of the nation. RFK's remarks cut through all of that. The binary choices of left versus right, war versus anti-war are being shattered as Donald Trump reasserts real American policies and liberates us from the strategic and economic straitjacket imposed since the end of World War II. These aren't new ideas. They are the oldest American ideas, suppressed and now coming back. I'm Susan Kokinda. I remember Kennedy's uncle and father. I was on the ground in California campaigning for Robert F. Kennedy Sr. when he was shot. And like his son, I've spent more than 5 decades fighting for the opportunity that Donald Trump has given us to bring those principles back to life. So if you have a sense that something very big is happening, that the world is being rearranged in ways the media can't explain, then hit those like, share, and subscribe buttons, stay in touch, and help us expand our reach. Here's what we're covering today. First, the Iran conflict and how it represents a complete break with 6 decades of imperial foreign policy. Second, the significance of J.D. Vance in the negotiations. And third, how Scott Bessent and Peter Navarro are defining the battle by name. That is the American system versus the British system. So let's start with who is no longer in the room and why that changes everything. This week, the empire's own institutions confirmed it. Chatham House, the British foreign policy flagship think tank, published a piece with a headline that could have come from this channel. Britain's handling of the Iran war shows the limits of UK power. Chatham House also announced that the House of Lords International Relations and Defense Committee will come to Chatham House, where they will discuss the question of what they now call the not-so-special relationship and whether it can survive Trump 2.0. The empire is writing its own autopsy, and the conservative treehouse gave it the headline it deserved. British Defense Minister outlines how the UK Navy will defend the West as soon as they locate their ships. With those tools of the great game sidelined, watch what is actually happening. Right now in Islamabad, the foreign ministers of Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and Egypt are sitting together for the purpose of opening up a dialogue between the United States and Iran, not managing the conflict, ending it. Britain is not in that room, neither is the EU or NATO. And when Pakistan's foreign minister announced that Iran had agreed to allow 20 more Pakistani flagged ships through the Strait of Hormuz, he addressed his statement on X directly to J.D. Vance, Marco Rubio, and Steve Witkoff. Not London, not Brussels, to the Americans. And President Trump himself reposted it within hours. So you have a sovereign Islamic quartet with no colonial history in Iran, no Sykes-Picot baggage, and no 75 years of imperial management to answer for, trying to broker a sovereign resolution. That's a genuinely new thing, and it's happening because the old managers are no longer in the room. And it is important that you see that this is new. The dominant media narratives are written to keep you angry and impotent. Promethean action puts you on this new stage of history and gives you the in-depth analysis you need. So head on over to our website and sign up for our free newsletter. The link is in the description. Now, the empire being out of the room only matters if someone else is in it and acting like an American. And that's where Vice President J.D. Vance comes in. President Trump confirmed that Vice President Vance will be the lead negotiator for the U.S. And the well-sourced Barak Ravid at Axios gave that background. He says, Vance's seniority in the administration and his well-documented opposition to open-ended conflicts overseas, White House officials say, make him a more attractive interlocutor for the Iranians than Witkoff and Kushner. Partly for those reasons, Witkoff recommended Vance as lead negotiator. And Axios quotes another senior administration advisor saying, if the Iranians can't strike a deal with Vance, they won't get a deal. And the article makes clear that Vance has directly challenged Netanyahu on Israel's overly optimistic assessment on regime change and on its endgame goals, both of which diverge from the administration's. The neoconservative model that ran American Middle East policy for 30 years never did that. American foreign policy was just a tool in the British toolkit alongside Israeli foreign policy and Muslim Brotherhood fostered extremism. The result? 30 years of managed conflict and no resolution. Vance is doing something different, acting as an American official representing American interests, including our interests in not fighting a forever war. Now, Vance's role is public, but it does echo something older. It echoes the role that Robert F. Kennedy Sr. played in the Cuban Missile Crisis. JFK sent his brother, the Attorney General, to conduct secret back-channel discussions with the Soviets because he knew that RFK shared his agenda, the American agenda, and that the Soviets would understand that. This is what RFK Jr. is pointing at, not a specific tactic, but a disposition. And that disposition has largely been absent since FDR last exercised American power during World War II. The end game of that war was to defeat fascism. But Roosevelt's stated intention, unfulfilled because he died before the war ended, was to free the world from British 18th century methods. Unfortunately, those methods remained intact until now, as managed conflicts kept especially the Mideast from economic development and peace. Now, the same break you're watching in Islamabad is happening simultaneously in trade and monetary policy. And this week, both Peter Navarro and Scott Bessent put a name to it. In a Politico interview, presidential trade advisor Navarro made clear that this administration is carrying out a revolution.
Our trade policy is fundamentally revamping the entire world order in the language of the other side. Donald Trump, going back in history, channeling Alexander Hamilton, channeling McKinley, channeling Henry Clay, is basically adopting an America First policy where the protection against unfair trade makes us stronger.
So Navarro joins Trade Ambassador Jameson Greer, Treasury Secretary Bessent, and Vice President Vance in affirming that this administration's policy is that of the champions of the American system. And Navarro then made clear who represents the old order. He was asked about Mark Carney, former governor of the Bank of England and now Canadian Prime Minister, who is currently organizing a WTO coalition to try and check Americans' trade policy. Navarro was direct. He said, "It's typical Carney behavior. We've got a problem in Great Britain and Canada with liberal Trump haters." Now, let's look at Carney's former employer, the Bank of England, which was suddenly in the news this week in a story that was overshadowed by Iran coverage and the government shutdown. U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent went to war with the Financial Times, the mouthpiece of the City of London, on the issue of the Bank of England. The FT published a story claiming Bessent had praised the Bank of England as a model for restructuring the Federal Reserve. And before they published it, Bessent had given them an on-the-record denial, and they ran it anyway on anonymous sources. So Bessent shot back with vehemence. By publishing this explicitly false story, the FT has officially become tabloid trash for market participants. In short, FT has literally manufactured an entirely fake policy position for me and the administration. And here's the punchline. He went on to say, "There is much to be said about the storied Bank of England, but any recreation of its operating framework on this side of the Atlantic has never been contemplated. The shameful journalists and editors at the FT are shocking in their meretriciousness, lack of standards, and general intellectual libertinism. It is the worst tradition of Fleet Street to manufacture news rather than report it." So what's really going on here? The Bank of England model is the City of London's preferred architecture for central banking. Bessent is rejecting that. He wants to narrow the Fed's mandate and return to financial instruments and credit instruments that will serve productive economic activity. When the FT tried to claim his reform agenda for their framework, he smacked it down with force. The American system revival that Navarro is pursuing in trade, that Besant is pursuing in monetary policy, that Vance is expressing in foreign policy, it's all one thing. So whether it's the FT or Carney's rules-based order or the Chatham House autopsy, it's the same old imperial order responding to Trump's new American agenda. Which takes us back to where we started. RFK Jr. at CPAC saying his father and uncle would support what Trump is doing in Iran and in the economy. What Kennedy is saying is that there is an older tradition that defines what American power is actually for. Not managing conflict for imperial financial interests, not free trade frameworks that drain American manufacturing, not central banking architectures designed in the City of London, but policies that support sovereign national development, productive economy, and policies that are actually for peace built through construction. Hamilton named it, FDR reasserted it, JFK tried to revive it, and Trump is the first president since then to bring it back to life. That is what is invisible inside the binary choices that the old order provides you. Pro-war or anti-war, free trade or socialism, Fed tightening or loosening. Every one of those binaries is a cage, designed to make the American system unspeakable. Well, Promethean action speaks the American system loud and clear. And once you see the tradition, the shape of what is happening becomes obvious.
Again, you don't get that on Fox News. And there's a reason that, again, those women are not invited on Fox News. They take history into account. They take very specific words that are used by very specific people who have specific ties to historic events into account, and then they lay this all out. They don't just ask the why question. They do that all the time, but they get down to the actual answer. And that, again, is important. That's the biggest part of all of this. Yes, it takes time. Yes, it takes analysis. And yes, it takes a firm understanding of accurate history. But that's something that a Fox News never does. It's just talking point, talking point, talking point. One familiar face, another familiar face. One person who thinks they have it all figured out, another person who also thinks they have it all figured out. And then let's throw in, just for a little excitement, somebody who's on the other side of the so-called political aisle. And then we'll just argue for 24 hours, 365. Again, if you're going to ask who, what, where, when, why, and how, then you'd better answer them. And that's one of the things that Promethean action does, which I thoroughly enjoy. So, yeah, Susan Kakinda's right. There's a lot of good things happening. Yes, there's plenty of concerning things happening as well, and anybody can cherry pick what those are anytime they want. But there's a lot of good things happening as well. Okay, education stuff. I've got a few things, and then I wanted to bounce over to Reddit teachers and the subreddit over there, which is absolutely hilarious. And if you want a good laugh, certainly if you're a former educator or you just hate the education system like I do, indoctrination system, then yeah, I would recommend always bouncing over to Reddit teachers and just reading some of the posts. They are drop dead funny. But first, I was texted this by Josiah Richwine, rather interesting development here. Apparently, a friend of theirs, one of their family members, retired from the Pasco County, Florida school district. And down in Florida, every single county is its own school district. And apparently they were an administrative secretary, I think, for the board members or something along those lines, within their board office. And not only did they retire, but they are replacing that person's position with artificial intelligence. And this right here is exactly where the business is going. School districts employ way too many people that an AI system could easily handle. I'll give you another example. It's something that's been brought up even locally where I live. The individuals who are in charge within any school district of routing the bus routes and mapping all of that information out, that can easily be done with an AI system in the blink of an eye. That you don't have to hire people to figure out where the buses have to go and how they have to get there and all of that stuff. How many students are supposed to be on every bus. If a person knows how to use an AI system, and it's not difficult, you can take literal pictures of the statistics that you have, plug them into an AI system, and just ask it to do something for you. it'll do it. And it'll do it for free. So again, as we continue to live in this time where people are receiving, hopefully in the future, some of their tax money back, school districts all across the nation that are crumbling and losing money because they don't know how to properly spend it when they get it. Not to mention it's a bad product and it's a crumbling business, so that's what comes with the territory. Instead of fixing the problem, they go to the taxpayers with levies and the whole thing, and they beg for money. They put all of that on the ballot, and then, of course, the slaves in typical fashion line up and tell themselves the same lies that they've believed their whole life, which is, I can't imagine a school system not existing in the place where I live. And then they tax themselves even further, not knowing that you can use AI systems to eliminate positions and save yourself a copious amount of money. Again, some school districts don't even have directors of communication. They don't have marketing strategists as far as your school system is concerned. Not to mention, why would a public school, need a marketing strategist? Why would such a position need to be paid? And by the way, they get paid way more than your average school teacher does. Seems like something artificial intelligence could do, doesn't it? Again, it's not a difficult position. If a computer can do it for free, why pay a human being? I'm not saying that to sound dystopian or anything. I don't think that all humans should be replaced. That's certainly not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that in the higher paid positions that are useless, it's pretty evident that you don't need them. So, yeah, it's happening. School districts are already doing it, and it's not really getting a lot of attention, and it's not getting a lot of play. But yeah, it is happening. There was also this, kind of a big deal, certainly out of Los Angeles, having to do, of course, I'm sure, with their superintendent whose home was raided by the feds. LA school district accused of diverting $22 million in student funds through pay-to-play scheme. This is from lizpeak.com. A largest scandal ever seen involving the Los Angeles Unified School District has resulted in felony charges tied to an alleged $22 million scheme that authorities say diverted funds intended for students. Wait a minute. You mean a school system stole money? No way. It's all they do. It's practically a job description. It says prosecutors allege that a former district IT staffer and private tech executive orchestrated what is being described as one of the largest suspected money laundering operations in the district's history. Probably any district's history. Hong Grace Peng, if that's their real name, who previously worked as a technical project manager for LAUSD, and, good lord, Gotham Sampath, Indian maybe? Who also owns a company called Innovive, are accused of running a long-term pay-to-play arrangement that steered millions in school contracts to Sampath's firm, so says Fox News. This case involves a blatant abuse of public trust, funneling taxpayer dollars intended for students into personal coffers, said Nathan Hockham in a statement. Quote, this vendor working with LAUSD project manager allegedly carried out a multi-year, multi-contract pay-to-play arrangement that siphoned millions of dollars from our schools. According to investigators, Peng was involved in awarding contracts connected to the district's My Integrated Student Information System, or MISIS, between 2018 and 2022. Authorities claim those agreements, worth roughly $22 million, were largely funneled into that company, Innovive. Prosecutors further allege that Sampath routed more than $3 million back to Peng using intermediaries. Laundering. Evidence cited by officials includes communications in which the pair allegedly discussed deleting messages, securing contracts, and transferring funds. Well, here's the best part. Now that they've been arrested, or an arrest warrant at least has been issued, for Peng, while Sampath is expected to be extradited to California, it says court appearances rather for both individuals have not yet been scheduled. What are the odds that the superintendent would be involved in this? Again, if you've got all their names, and you squeeze these two guys, I bet you end up finding out that the superintendent was directly involved, not to mention why would they raid his house? And then you have this arrest. He's going to jail, and it's going to be great. Okay. There was also this. Apparently there was a shooting. Murder-suicide in a Texas preparatory high school. 15-year-old male student is dead after shooting his teacher at a preparatory high school in Comal County, Texas on Monday. Teacher was transported to a local San Antonio hospital. According to the Associated Press, the student fatally shot himself after he shot his teacher on campus at Hill Country College Preparatory High School. School is currently on lockdown. FBI is aware of the shooting. Blah, 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 blah. The reason that you know that this actually happened, which it probably did, was because it received next to zero media attention whatsoever. So it wasn't scripted. It was just clearly a deranged student shooting his teacher and then killing himself. And I don't think that the teacher is dead. So there's that. Okay, Reddit teachers. Here we go. This is absolutely hilarious. I love this stuff. And again, as a former educator, I can tell you that there are endless logical posts that actually exist over on this subreddit, which are absolutely funny. Again, I detest Reddit. I'm never on it. But every now and again, I check out Reddit teachers because it's just too funny. It says the following here. Here's one. And it's also depressing to some extent because, again, it's an open look to the corrupt system and then, of course, the low IQs of the individuals who work within this business as well. It was titled, "If a School is Hiring Half Its Staff, Run." It says the following, quote, "I feel like this should be obvious, but honestly, it's not when you're job hunting and just trying to land somewhere decent. If you pull up a district job portal and notice that there's a huge chunk of the openings are for the same school, that is not, wow, lots of opportunities, quote unquote. That is a 5-alarm fire. It says, yeah, teachers retire, people move, life happens, but schools do not just casually lose half their staff. I learned that the hard way. When I was job searching, I noticed one school had listing after listing after listing. It should have set off alarms, but I convinced myself it was just coincidence or growth or whatever. At the job fair, I even asked about it. The principal told me they were letting go of teachers who don't care about kids, quote unquote. So let me get this straight. You're telling me over half your staff, 40 plus out of roughly 70, all just magically didn't care about kids? Come on. They said that wasn't a staff problem, but a leadership problem, and I walked right into it. Now we're at the time of the year again. Positions are opening, people are looking to transfer, and districts are posting like crazy. So here's the advice I wish I had actually listened to. Pay attention to patterns. Ask why there are so many openings, and don't just accept the admin answer at face value. If you can, reach out to someone who actually works there, not administration, a real classroom teacher. People will usually give you at least a hint of what's going on if you ask the right way. I did that the next time around, and it made all the difference. I'm in a much better place now because of it, thank God. Just don't ignore the red flags because you want the job to work out. No. Unquote. Yeah, that's an excellent point. I could theoretically spend I could spend hours on that post alone. But I want to read another one of these responses here to that very post because it was interesting. Somebody posted this below. They said, as somebody who was bullied by a group of shitty people who do this, I feel like there should be a policy preventing this from happening. My assistant principal used to be a teacher at a high school. When she was going to be an assistant principal at my middle school for the first time, 3 teachers from her department followed her. So my colleagues were besties with her because they used to be a whole department at another school. Meanwhile, she hated me and made my life miserable during my time there. And I couldn't even vent to my colleagues because, again, they were besties with her and would rat me out. I felt so awkward not being part of the group. I later learned that she used to be in a 5-people department, so only one person of her old department didn't follow her. I have a theory that the whole department was going to move with her, and that one person who stayed couldn't move because the position had already been offered to me, and that's why she hated me from the get-go, unquote. Again, the backstabbing and the nepotism and the favoritism that exists in the business is beyond disgusting. But of course, it's like that in endless businesses. There are tons of comments to that one post. But again, they're 100% right when they're talking about the time of the year. This is the time of the year when teachers have to commit to either stay or leave the district altogether. Sometimes they want a different job within the same district. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes they're forced out. This again is when the bullies come right up to the forefront and they start pushing each other around and doing what they can within the business to get rid of the people who, again, ask questions and think critically. And, don't just stand in line because they're told to. This is unfortunately when the best educators and the best thinkers and the best Americans are forced out of the business. It happens every single year. And it's terrible, but again, it happens certainly starting now all the way through the summertime. Fortunately, it's also the time of year where endless parents are pulling their children out of school too, and they're looking for alternative places to send them to school next year. And that's a very good thing. And that too is a process that goes on throughout the entire summer also. But again, this is the time of year where everybody is at their wits' end and that they're basically at the end of their rope. And they've just had it, and they say, I need to work some other place, I need to find a different building to work in, or I just want to pull my kids out altogether. So yeah, happens constantly every single year. Here's another post. This is also, again, on Reddit Teachers, and they said the following. Teacher made a child pee on herself. It said, quote, I am the kindergarten assistant. The teacher is the absolute worst, and her priorities are so out of whack. Yesterday, a little girl woke up from her nap and said she really had to go to the bathroom. Instead of rushing her to the bathroom, the teacher stopped to chastise the student, saying, quote, stop holding yourself like that, it's not polite. Because she had her hand over her privates and was literally about to pee on herself. She told her about 2 or 3 times how impolite holding herself was, and the extra 20 to 30 seconds of focusing on being polite, quote unquote, caused her to pee herself. Yeah. Again, school teachers. Let's play a little game with this woman, psychologically speaking. A girl wakes up from a nap, a female student wakes up from a nap. Normally, going to the bathroom would be the very first thing that would have to happen. They eat lunch, they take a nap. Again, we didn't have nap time when I was in kindergarten, but whatever. They do apparently in this school. You would think again that going to the bathroom would be the first thing that would happen almost every single time. So, when that apparently is about to happen, that transpires, that entire conversation, the child wets on themselves, and at the same time, we're supposed to expect that female teacher has the wherewithal or the observation skills to figure out whether or not, or to notice whether or not, a fellow employee might be doing something inappropriate with another student. Again, I'm thinking of the whole Jason Mers case and how all of these teachers just apparently came to his defense blindly. I mean, you have a female teacher in this scenario who doesn't even know that a female student waking up from a nap would have to go to the bathroom, let alone a male student. Again, is it their first day on the job? That's probably what happens with all of their students on a day in and day out basis. It's not a new occurrence, I would venture to guess. But we're supposed to believe again that adult in that situation, assuming it's real, why wouldn't it be? That individual, that adult again, working in that building would have the observational skills to notice other serious things going on when they apparently don't even have the observational skills, let alone the IQ, to diagnose that a child would have to go to the bathroom after waking up from a nap. Thomas Sowell said it, and he was right. We're talking about the lower IQ individuals who work within the business. It is a fact. It's not all of them, but it is plenty. And that right there, I think, is one prime example. There's this post also, a short one, and this is important, and I brought this up years ago. And I witnessed this years ago myself. This was titled, "Students Now Have the Desktop Computer Skills of Older Boomers." They said, quote, "Dear administration, these kids are not computer geniuses. They don't know the difference between an application and a file. They can't figure out anything on a desktop computer on their own. Bring back desktop computer skill classes," unquote. Yeah. When I taught, I'll never forget a student looking at me who, again, I had in middle school and then I taught him in high school. We knew each other. Cool kid. Nice kid. But he looked at me and he was in front of a computer. And he goes, "Mr. Brooks, come here." And I went, "Yeah, what's up?" I mean, the directions of everything he had to do were right in front of him. But he points at the computer and he points at Microsoft Word. And he goes, I don't know how to use this." And then he reaches into his pocket, and he had concern on his face. He reaches into his pocket, he pulls out his cell phone, and he goes, "I know how to use this." And he points at his cell phone, and then he points at the computer screen on the computer on Microsoft Word, and he goes, "I don't know how to use this." And I looked at him and I went, "Really?" And he goes, "Yeah." He was in high school. He was like a junior. I showed him how to use it. I said, "Well, this is a mouse. Put your hand here." He put his hand on the mouse and said, "You click this way, and this is how you get things done, and then here's your keyboard, and you type." And he started to type. And I mean, he was hunting and pecking. It was, it was just one keystroke at a time, very slowly. He figured it out. But the concern on his face was legit, because he hadn't been taught it. His own parents didn't teach him how to use a computer. Here's another post. Again, I could read these all day. These are fascinating. And this is a very relevant one. In fact, I'll end with this one. It was titled the following: "Terrifying Conversation in High School, 9th Grade Math Class Today." They said the following, quote, "In the math world, we've been dealing with students using apps to generate ideas, answers, etc. for years. In my upper-level classes, I try to work with kids to help them either pick better resources to support learning or use it as a learning tool, not a completion tool. Freshman Algebra 1 course today, and I have a student who will almost always ask how this applies to real life. Not in the typical, quote, 'I don't want to learn this' way. He's genuinely curious." Another kid jumps in, not reading the conversation right, and says, quote, "I'm with you, man. Why do we really need to learn any of this? ChatGPT will just do it all way faster." I reply with my more standard answer of learning and building problem-solving skills, and how that's also an equally important part of my job, learning how to use our brains and make informed decisions. This kid answers back, not just trying to rage bait me, that he does not think that's a legitimate thing that's important in the world anymore due to ChatGPT. That all decision-making in the future will be done by AI, so why do we have to learn anything, and why do we have to think anymore? I try to push back a little with how important it is at their age to learn how to use their brain. Same answer back. So finally I propose, quote, "Okay, you're working a job 5 years from now, and there is an intense situation where you need to make an urgent decision. Quote, I'd tell my boss I was going to use ChatGPT, and they're going to be happy about it because that's going to always make the right choices," unquote. And then they said, "Arg, this scares me." Oh, the business is in deep, deep trouble. And I'm telling you, these students' over-reliance on AI is also going to put them in a very bad position. Here were the two replies to that, and one of the responses was from the original poster. The first person replied and said, quote, "Why does your boss even need you if you're just going to ask ChatGPT questions for the answer? Wouldn't he just fire you and use ChatGPT himself instead?" And the original poster replied to that and said, "That's what I tell my students. They respond well to this. It gives them a moment to pause and think. I frame it as if they won't even be needed in the future if they are just an AI prompter with no original thoughts or ideas, not just being fired, but being totally non-existent in society." Yeah. What you should do is watch Terminator 2. Have them watch that movie. That's why artificial intelligence, again, in the wrong hands with the wrong people, is a bad idea. This too is what the mesh network is building around us also. It's an over-reliance on all of these tools so that a person feels like they don't have to actually build anything anymore. They don't even have to think. Case in point, this one. I know I said I was done. I'm not. This is hilarious too. Another person responded and they said, "I've been doing observations in a 9th grade algebra class. On Monday," this is a pre-service teacher, "my mentor teacher made the choice to no longer give homework, quote unquote. No student work would be done outside of class. She provides in-class time for them to complete the work on pencil and paper. She told the class too many of them were cheating and then bombing the tests. They were just getting further and further behind because they weren't learning the previous skills. Well, she made this announcement Monday, and over half the class ripped their papers to shreds and threw them away. They put their heads down the entire class. We even had the principal in there, and they refused to do anything. Their homework was every other day, and it's 5 questions. They are refusing to do any work in class now because they can't go home and cheat on 5 problems. I've been genuinely flabbergasted," unquote. Yeah. It's an unmanageable business, and it's collapsing. And this is exactly what happens inside of a terrible business when the customers have had enough, because the product sucks. I love it. There's no getting it back. There's absolutely no getting it back. This again was even raised, it's an excellent point too, raised by a listener of the show. They said it in a comment section back in the episode when I was talking about Melania Trump's comments about AI and AI tutoring and robots tutoring kids and the whole thing. They raised a great point, and they said, it's possible that Melania Trump is just trying to open the eyes of parents to give them another option. And to basically say, look, you don't have to go into these unsafe environments. You don't have to go into these indoctrination camps where children are either learning or not learning. And if they are learning, they're learning things that are terrible. That you can do this at home on your own. And self-directed instruction is actually far more in-depth than anything that they're going to receive within a school where they have to operate within parameters. Because real learning doesn't have parameters, does it? You're on your own. It's one rabbit hole after another. It's one scaled mountain after another, looking across the entire landscape, scaling back down the mountain and back up again, down a rabbit hole, out a rabbit hole, in, out all day long. That's real learning for a lifetime. But school teaches people to not learn. That's really their mission statement. That's really their goal. And it works. It gets them to hate learning. It gets them to hate reading. And it's been awfully successful for numerous generations now. But the addition of all of this technology within that same system that claims to have all of these guardrails that everybody has to operate in, that's not learning either. Doesn't matter how many bells, whistles, and shiny toys you have. If there's guardrails, you still have a problem. Real learning doesn't have guardrails. That's the point. A human being will figure out way more by themselves in a quiet room with no distractions and a computer and the internet. Are they going to find terrible things? Sure. Develop bad habits? Maybe. But the things that they'll learn and the dot connecting that will happen just, again, innately, because human beings are designed to do that when they are outside of a brainwashing system, then they can actually deprogram themselves. Them, a computer, and Jesus. And just being quiet and deciding on their own with the thoughts in their head as to where they want to go to find particular answers. And they'll find out through enough use of AI that AI answers are not the answer. That you're not going to get all of the answers through an artificial intelligence system. You just won't. See, if they taught the truth in school, these students would already know this within school about artificial intelligence. Again, you could show them Europa: The Last Battle, for example. Have them watch that at home, and then have them come back to school, get on an AI system, and have an AI system again describe Europa: The Last Battle to them, and then see what the AI system tells them. You know what the AI system would say. It's a white supremacist, false documentary about Adolf Hitler and World War II and Freemasons and blah, blah, blah. That's what it would say. It would disparage it instead of, again, allowing the individual human being to think about it critically with emotion and attention in a quiet environment within the confines of their own home. That's the control that, again, isn't being explained to a lot of these students, which is unfortunate. Some of them probably know it, but many don't. That it's still censorship. And again, that censorship is designed to be mind control. And therein lies, of course, the much larger problem. Ladies and gentlemen, I'll leave it there. Happy Easter weekend to everybody. Hope you have a good one. Hope it's relaxing. And make sure and check out theamericanclassroom.substack.com and the article on mesh networking if you are interested. Feel free and share that as well. All the material over there, of course, is free. And ladies and gentlemen, I will catch you on Monday. Peace. Thank you for listening to American Education FM. Make sure and check out AmericanEducationFM.com for more information. Take care and God bless.